Hello, everyone. My introduction is done, so I guess I can skip over that and skip straight to the title. Kind of a silly title, clickbaity maybe, but I think it's pretty true as we'll get through this presentation. The basic premise in this presentation is it's kind of an anthology of 10 different little stories, of little snippets of ways that you can get past the GUI and do some different things. So we start with a problem. The problem can't be solved in the GUI. So we try a code solution, and we're able to solve that problem. That's the basic premise, the basic framework of all these little things I'm going to talk about today. 3 different flavors that these stories come in. We've got Arcade, Python, and JavaScript. More heavy in the JavaScript end. I work with JavaScript SDK, building web applications, so I've got a lot of those. Arcade is mostly thinking about pop-ups, and Python is a lot of times using the Python SDK inside of notebooks, so modifying stuff in ArcGIS Online like services. So starting out with Arcade. In this example, we have a feature layer with some features that we click on, and when we click on those features, we want an audio to play. This is in our application called Pronounce Wisconsin, so it'd be nice to hear a pronunciation. The way we can do that is in our pop-ups, in our map viewer editor, we can just put in an HTML tag for audio. You can see here we've got a placeholder where we can take our file name and put it in there. It's just a MP3 that's on our server, and that is filled in through a value that's in the feature layer. And in this way, you click on the feature, it plays a sound. You might have not known that you could do that. There's actually a lot of supported HTML tags in ArcGIS Online in their pop-ups. This is just a small piece of that. You can see that audio is in there. So my first tip, and this is where I'm going to start some rhyming for my tips, maybe to get you excited or hooked here. So we are in the time after Rome fell. Get with the times, use HTML. So that's my first tip. Thank you. Our next little story here is filtering out bad data from a pop-up. So we've got land cover data. You can see we have cover 1, cover 2. Within that cover data, we have the cover type, the minimum and maximum diameter of trees in that cover, and also the density of that stand. So in the table, you can see that we have columns for each cover, and the cover isn't always there. Sometimes there's only one cover, you can have up to 4. So how do we filter out when there isn't a cover to not show that in the sidebar, in a pop-up? The easiest and most simple, and probably the first that comes to mind is, okay, well, if the cover's null, don't show it. Well, sometimes the cover is actually a blank space. And I don't have control over the data as an application maker to go and fix and remove those blank spaces. So I just kind of have to figure out a way to capture those. The minimum diameter can also be not null. Sometimes the cover is null, but there's a diameter. So for whatever reason, the cover is missing, but we still want to show it in the sidebar. We can't just look at the cover and say, is the cover type missing? If it is, don't show it. There's other data that could be there. Well, it could also be 0. Same thing for maximum. Same thing for density, same thing for percent cover, and percent cover is a little bit extra because it's got blank space as well. So we have all these things we have to search for to filter out to make sure that we're showing stuff in the sidebar or in the pop-up that is useful and not showing stuff that's not. And then we get a big jumble of code. So these are just a whole bunch of if statements that describe what I just was pointing out in the last slide. Yeah, so for each part, it's just if that piece of information exists, we're going to throw that into the pop-up. This is, okay, this rhyming thing was the first one I came up with, and then I decided to do the rest. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but if it is broke, ifs fix it. Yeah, sometimes we're not in control of the data set that we're given, and we're just trying to show it in the best way possible. So sometimes you just kind of have to be a little hacky and use some if statements to filter out stuff you don't like. Okay, on to Python. 2 examples here. This first one is showing HTML from your feature class. So this comes from our LiDAR data web app. Basically, click on a county, pop-up shows up. We have some text with some links, and each link is linking to that LiDAR acquisition. In the table, we just store it as HTML. You can see as I hover over, it looks kind of jumbled, but it's HTML. If we look at one of those links, we have a question mark, and then something equals something, and something equals something. These are query strings. We tried to enter this into our field, and we ended up getting an error. It's like, hey, this pop-up has invalid HTML content. Esri's validator for when you're trying to put information into that field, into that value, into that cell, didn't like something that we were trying to enter. And it turns out it didn't like our ampersand and our equal signs. Why? I don't know. That's a very common thing in URLs to see. So if we wanted to still have those links the way they were, we'd have to maybe sanitize the links. So we could replace the equal sign with and equals, the ampersand with and amp. These are called character entities in HTML. So we could do that. It would make our strings longer. It would make them even uglier than they already are. So is there a way around that? Turns out there is. If you hop into your feature layer collection, so this is Python, I'm going to have to kind of just talk over it, you don't have to know the specifics. We go into the properties of that feature layer collection. There's actually a property called XSS prevention info, and we have a key value pair here of prevention enabled. It was enabled, it was set to true. So what happens if we set that to false? Turns out you set that to false, and suddenly that sanitizer looks at the stuff that you're putting in and goes, no, it's fine, you're good to go. So we were able to just change one value in our definition, and suddenly you would accept our links without having to do any sanitization. So my next one here is, if your service does not work for thee, perhaps try changing a property. Yeah. So you can always head into your properties of your service and change them. I actually did a workshop earlier in this conference, and a lot of what we were doing was just modifying the service to get it to do what we want to do, and we couldn't do that in a GUI. So, yeah. Have a video here. So we can see we have raster tiles. As we zoom in, it's going to switch to a feature layer. It's probably pretty common for folks if you're making web applications. If you have a feature layer and you're zoomed way out, there's too many features to load well, so you have to have raster. So in this example, though, you can see that we do have a pop-up on raster tiles. You might think, well, before October of last year, it was hard to add pop-ups to raster tiles and style them nicely. It used to be that you had to go in the classic editor, hit config pop-up, and the way we got around this, because we had our feature layers that had pop-ups a certain way, and we wanted our raster tile layer to match exactly, so that whether you're zoomed in or zoomed out, the pop-ups look exactly the same. What we ended up doing is taking the pop-up info from our feature layer, and then just using that as the definition for the pop-up info for our raster tile layer. And in this way, they were going to match exactly. So the idea would be we'd go into our feature layer, we'd set the pop-ups, and then we'd run the code, and it would copy the pop-ups from our feature layer to our raster tile layer. This point's kind of moot these days. As of October of last year, you now can edit the pop-ups of raster tile layers in the new editor. It's exactly the same. You could just copy and paste. That's probably easier than using code. But I think this tip can still be used more generally. My little phrase here is, hey, you're smarter than a toad. Build it in a GUI, copy it in code. Weaker one for sure. The basic idea is there might be other examples where this might work. So like, say you have a Symbology that's easy to build in one place, but it's hard to make in the other place, you can maybe copy it over. Or if you are build the Symbology one place and then you can apply it to many other layers if they're like duplicate or something like that. The basic idea is you can grab information from one service, apply it to another service. Into the JavaScript. This is where I spend a lot of time. That's why there are 6 of them. This first one's kind of boring, but I want to cover it anyway. This is about sim symbols. Who here in this room has heard of sim symbols before? A couple people. I kind of expect that folks who've been around a long time will know what this is, because this technology predates ArcGIS Online. I think it comes from like even before ArcGIS ArcMap, probably whatever was before that, Avenue, or no, that's not a program, but yeah, really old thing that was brought to ArcGIS Online. The basic idea here is we've got a polygon, it's got some hash marks, and we actually can look at the definition of how a sim symbol is defined in ArcGIS Online as an object, and we just have our solid stroke, we have a hatch fill, rotation 45 degrees, separated by 10 pixels. I think this is just a really cool thing to use if you're using the map editor and you just can't quite get what you want, you can do it this way. What's interesting is if you build your layer in ArcGIS Pro and then you publish it, you might actually be publishing your definition of your symbology as a sim symbol and not know it. So desktop software uses the old sim symbol definition, and so yeah, whether you want to do it like I did in code or you want to do it in ArcGIS Pro, doesn't matter. Same result. You can get access to Symbology you wouldn't have access to otherwise. If you don't want to build it yourself but still want to generate the JSON code, Esri has a sim symbol builder, and yeah, it's pretty easy to use. Gives you a user interface. Probably looks a lot like you would see in ArcGIS Pro, where you're got different layers to this symbol and you can edit them. This one doesn't rhyme. It's just an alliteration and a bit of a tongue twister. So let's give this a shot. Synthesizing symbology symbols is surprisingly simple using sim symbols. Thank you. This next example, this is a Mapless presentation of data. Someone at the keynote yesterday asked, how do we make our dynamic maps accessible to folks? And I whispered to the people at my table, not a map. Sometimes things don't need to be maps. So we're back to this example where you click on a county, you get the LiDAR acquisitions for that county. That data could be shown as a simple HTML page. It doesn't have to be a map. But then you might be thinking to yourself, I don't want to maintain two things. I don't want to maintain this map and now this HTML page. But you don't have to. That HTML page is generated by code. I make a query request to the ArcGIS REST service. So I'm accessing the feature service, and then I'm running it through a custom function that builds that into the website. So when you update your feature service, not only does it update your app, but it also updates your simple page. Maps are great for those who are able, but in addition, use REST services to make a table or a simple HTML site. Table just rhymed with able, so. Another video here. As we zoom in, look in this corner, you'll see it changes from tiles to features. And when we have features, then we can click and we can get a transparency slider. So this is a custom widget, a functionality that we wanted to have. This was a conversion from an old custom app that was in Carto, and we were converting it over to Experience Builder. However, we ran into an issue. We wanted to use Experience Builder, but we wanted a custom widget. It turns out you can't do that in ArcGIS Online. However, if you use Experience Builder Dev Edition, now you can do custom widgets. So a little refresher on how Experience Builder works. You're in the GUI, very simple, build your app, go to publish, and you publish in ArcGIS Online. It's very straightforward. However, if you're doing Dev Edition, you have to install Experience Builder Dev Edition software on your computer, create the custom widget, then now you're into the Experience Builder Dev Edition GUI where you can go and do everything like you normally do. However, when it comes to publishing, you export the build, so it gives you the static HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and then you publish it on your own server. So there's advantages and disadvantages to that. An advantage of publishing on your own server is now everything's on your domain. So we've got whatever your domain is, and it's good for brand awareness, but the disadvantage is you're having to actually host it. You don't get any of the updates from ArcGIS Online. So pros and cons. Another way to view this in kind of a pros and cons table here. Experience Builder, is it no code, meaning easier to use? Yes. Supports custom widgets. The regular Experience Builder doesn't, but Dev Edition does. Custom domain, yes, but now you have to host it. And just in general, which is it easy or not? Experience Builder is very easy. A lot of us have probably in this room have probably used it. How many in this room have used Dev Edition? A couple. Yeah, but is it easy? No, I'm seeing heads shake now. Yeah, so building your apps in Experience Builder can feel like perdition. I don't know if there's any Catholics in this room. But it's made easier by custom widgets in Experience Builder Dev Edition. That was kind of forced, yeah. Okay, custom parameters. Yeah, so if you're in the map viewer and you go to your feature layer or item of any type, and you go into your properties and you scroll all the way at the bottom, who here has seen custom parameters in their properties before? I only see one hand. Okay, another hand. Only a couple people. Okay, how many of you know what they're used for? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so when you click on that, you can add a parameter and a value, so a key value pair. Here in this example, I've got layer and points. And the advantage of that is you set it in Map Viewer, and you can access it somewhere else, like the SDK for JavaScript. You can read in that key value pair. So in this example where I have some historical aerial imagery, and we've got the centers and the footprints, so the center and the footprint, we can set that key value pair, the layer and points, and then when we're in the code, we have the layer object, grab the custom parameters, and then in this case, layer in the place of key, and then that'll just give us that value. That can help us differentiate between different layers. I don't know if anyone's ever built applications before where you try to pull a name and you just get like a random name that the web map generates for you, but that can change over time if you change the layers. You set these parameters and that's going to be something that you can easily look for that will stay consistent. This is especially useful if you're trying to change the way your web app works after you've published, because some of your settings are set in the web app itself rather than in the code. So my tip here, if you're ready to leave the world of JavaScript amateurs, start communicating via custom parameters. Scale-dependent symbology. So as we zoom in, the symbols are slowly getting larger. This is just a nice feature to have. Users find it more intuitive when things are getting larger. If your symbols stay the same, it's kind of like this infinite zoom. It feels kind of a little uncomfortable. You're like, wait, am I zooming in? So the way that that was done in the last video was symbol size equals some parameter A times zoom to parameter B. What are A and B? Well, whatever you want. SEO starts with these numbers and we tweak from there. And you might be thinking to yourself, why do I need to do anything complicated? Can't I just click a button and make it resize automatically? Yes, you could. However, in the back end, the way that button works, that checkbox, is that it creates a value expression based on scale, and there's stops, and it only sets 4 of them. So at that scale, it's going to be size 15. At that scale, it's size 12. Helpful, better than nothing, but what if we had an infinite scale by using a formula? So again, we can set a value expression. We've got our formula down here that you saw before, and it just works really well. Yeah. These are so dumb. Do you want to be among the cartographic ascendant? Make your symbol size scale dependent.
You did a good job.
Thank you. Okay, this is our last one. Adding aerial imagery from S3. So in our Wayfinder application, we wanted to be able to add imagery. We thought this would be difficult. We thought we were going to have to create an imagery service, which is not a simple thing, but also, like, do you have to create an imagery service for each image then? And that's way too many images. We had the images already as geotiffs, cloud-optimized geotiffs, in an S3 bucket. So could we just, like, add those to the map somehow? Yeah, you can. There's something called imagery tile layer. We give it the URL of where that asset is located, and then you just add it to the map. I don't know. We thought this was going to be like a research project that was going to take weeks, and then like in the first hour, it was just like, oh wait, no, this exists, and it just works. So, yeah. Okay, this is my last one, and I'm hoping to get the audience in on this. So when I point to you, I want you to say out with me. So if you're dealing with services that make you sick, use imagery tile layer. It's magic. Oh, thank you, everyone. I'm going to skip over this, and I'm ready for questions.
Hi. When you have settings in the map viewer, sometimes like when I use like the assistant, I change like I have my maps, but then I'll publish a new feature server or image service, and then I'll change the HTTP URL, so then I don't have to change them in all the maps. But I feel like some of the settings don't refresh in map viewer. So like, if you could talk about like, do you have to change things like what exists in the map viewer versus like what you would have on your services?
Oh, are you saying that you bring an item into map viewer and then the properties get out of sync? Like Symbology is a common one, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I used to think that you couldn't send your Symbology back from a map to a feature layer, but it turns out you can. There's like a button in the properties where you can say, hey, save this back. And the same thing can be, like, it's more obvious. You can bring it forward. We can be like, hey, refresh. Whatever changed in the lower item, inherit that. I don't know about image services specifically, but I know with Symbology there's that. And I think too, like even if the GUI did fall short and didn't have that, you can still obviously do that in code. You can go to that original service and then set that as the properties inside the web app.
Okay.
Thank you for the talk. I had a question. I've been using, I think it was kind of new, but using in Experience Builder, there's like an arcade for data sources. I was wondering, have you used this much? Because I know it's like a little bit different using arcade in Experience Builder, but I think it is like some really cool functionality. But I was wondering if you had any experience with that. I know it's kind of a new thing.
No experience with that, but that sounds interesting. Does that mean that you could set like a filter, like query on it?
Yeah. So it's kind of like using like edits to the table. Like I was trying to get like a binning sort of thing, and I was struggling with HTML because I don't know that, but it's like basically like using arcade. You can like, we have it like editing like a sort of field, and then like it kind of passes that number to the arcade expression. Then it like brings back a layer to show in like a table. But you know, so it's just kind of, I thought it was a interesting thing to use, and I was wondering if you had experience with it. But yeah, that's
no,
right.
I haven't. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, to be able, like, whenever I'm building pop-ups, a lot of times I'm like, I'm not using the normal editor. I'm going into the arcade expression and doing some wild things, creating functions. And it's like, well, could have I just done that ahead of time in my data itself? But sometimes you don't have access to the data. So thank you, everyone.